Hello, friends, and welcome to this video on authentic English. And today I'm going to talk about restoration drama. Now, restoration drama, as you know, is the drama of the restoration period, which was published after 1660 when the monarchy was restored in England. And before that, during the Cromwellian regime, theatres were banned. So, when in 1660, what happened was that the monarchy was restored and Charles II was throned as the king, as the monarch. There was great exuberation in the world of drama, and we saw a number of comedies and a number of plays being published and performed. And those plays are termed as restoration drama. So, The Way of the World by William Congreve is an example of restoration comedy. So, it's one of the most famous restoration comedies of the period. Restoration drama were dramas written approximately between 1660 and 1710. The Cromwellian regime had banned theatres, and then the return of Charles II was celebrated by all the banished people. Charles II lifted the ban from theatre houses, and a lot of comedies were written and performed, which were often full of debauchery and licentiousness. So, this is a marked feature of these comedies, that they engaged a lot with licentiousness, and they were loaded with sexual puns and sexual themes. Now, after Charles II, whose reign ended in 1685, came to throne James II. He was the last Roman Catholic monarch. James II was soon deposed in 1688 with the Glorious Revolution. The Glorious Revolution resulted in the succession of William III of Orange along with his wife Mary II. So, this is just some background. William III was a Protestant king. He did not like the licentiousness in theatre. Also, the audience was getting more refined. So, of course, these comedies of the restoration comedies were kind of brute, and they were in a way savage. And as the audience got more refined, we saw that towards the end of the 17th century, comedies became less profane, and we can say that that period kind of marked the end of restoration drama as it was per se. And The Way of the World, if I'm talking about particularly here, the play, however, takes a lot from the traditional restoration comedy and has a lot of capitalist influence. Money matters a lot, and in fact, this is something which is very important with all of restoration comedies, not just The Way of the World. So, yeah, now let's move on to a study of different playwrights and their plays. So, the first play that we're going to talk about is Way of the World, and this is perhaps one of the most well known comedies of the Restoration period. It involves a complex love plot between Mirabelle and Millamant, and it uses a lot of deception and trickery. And I'm not going to go in deeply into the summary of the play, because I believe that summaries can be studied from the internet, and what one has to keep in mind is a general idea and the main themes and some of the facts about the play, because they are only important for any competitive exams. The play is based on two lovers, Mirabelle and Millamant. In order for them to marry and receive Millamant's full dowry, Mirabelle must receive the blessing of Millamant's aunt, Lady Wishfort. Unfortunately, Lady Wishfort is a very bitter lady who despises Mirabelle and wants her own nephew, Sir Wilfil, to wed Millamant. Meanwhile, Lady Wishfort, a widow, wants to marry again and has her eyes on an uncle of Mirabelle's, the wealthy Sir Roland. Another character, Fainall, is having a secret affair with Mrs. Marwood, a friend of Fainall's wife. So, the plot is summarized briefly in this slide. Mrs. Fainall, who is Lady Wishfort's daughter, herself once had an earlier affair with Mirabelle and remains his friend. In the meantime, Mirabelle's servant Waitwell is married to Foible, Lady Wishfort's servant. Waitwell pretends to be Sir Roland and, on Mirabelle's command, tries to trick Lady Wishfort into a false engagement. So basically, the broader picture in this play is that there are two lovers, Mirabelle and Millamant, and now that Mirabelle and Millamant love each other, Mirabelle does not want to marry Millamant without her dowry. So that's an important question here. This is not love in its ideal form. This is love in its day-to-day form, and it cares about all the practical assurances of the time that no, I just cannot marry you like that. And so, since Lady Wishfort is controlling the money that Milament will owe, Mirabelle and Milament together decide to play a clever trick and to receive all of the dowry that Milament has to be given, and only then their marriage is consummated. And there is also a proviso scene in the play which is quite important. And of course, like all restoration dramas, or I'll not say all, but most restoration dramas, the plot is kind of complex. There is a lot of trickery and a lot of plotting that's going on, and the plot is complex, but overall it's just a play that involves themes of love, deception, treachery, money, sexual debauchery. And this is one of the most important plays of the restoration period, and it was published in 1700. Okay. And so yeah, let me move ahead and talk about another playwright, which is who is William Wycherley. And yeah, to tell you about other plays that were written first by what's the name, so Congreve is also known for his play Love for Love and The Double Dealer. Now, Double Dealer is also an important play, and it was published in 1694. So it also involves a complicated plot which involves characters like Melephant and Cynthia, and there is also another use of deception and trickery for the sake of love and money and all of that stuff. So that play also, the summary can be read from the internet, it's easily available. We'll discuss another playwright, William Wycherley, and he writes about the social climate of the period. And yeah, so William Wycherley's most famous play is The Country Wife, which was published in 1675. And The Plain Dealer is, of course, the work of Wycherley. And The Plain Dealer and The Double Dealer sound very similar, but The Double Dealer is by Congreve and The Plain Dealer is by Wycherley. The Country Wife, this is his most famous work, and in this there is a man called Horner who pretends impotence to have sex with multiple married women. He identifies women seeking extramarital sex. Hypocritical upper class women in this way are criticized. The play was considered very licentious and was kept off stage for a lot of time. These two plays were based on Moliere's work. So Moliere was another French playwright, and he was also a part of the 17th century. And so William Wycherley modeled his plays on that. The Plain Dealer, based on Moliere's Les Misanthropes, was of the 17th century. And so William Wycherley modeled his plays on that. The Plain Dealer, based on Moliere's Les Misanthropes, was highly praised by John Dryden and John Dennis. That was equally condemned for its obscenity by many. So you see that obscenity is something which is very, very like particular in the drama of the Restoration Age. The title character is Captain Manly, a sailor who doubts the motives of everyone he meets except for his sweetheart Olivia and his friend Vernish. When Olivia jilts him and marries Vernish, he attempts to gain revenge by sending a page boy who, unknown to him, is a girl in disguise and is in love with him, to seduce Olivia. When the truth of the page's identity is discovered, Manly marries her instead. So what you see here is that this plot is reminiscent of Twelfth Night, where a page boy is sent. And what we see here is that Captain Manly is betrayed by his lover and his best friend Varnish, and then he sends a man who is actually a woman, and that woman actually loves Manly. And then when Manly sees that, yeah, let Olivia be what she is, this page boy actually loves me, so Manly marries the page boy because he believes that, yeah, this is something that I have to, this she's the one who loves me. Another playwright of the age is George Farquhar, who was an Irish playwright, and his most famous play is The Recruiting Officer. and licentiousness and sexual brazen exploits of two officials, Plume and Brazen. So yeah, these are two officials, two officers, and they also want to have some sexual fun, so it deals with them. And you don't really have to know the summary of these kind of plays because he's not that an important playwright. Bu's Stratagem is another play by Farquhar, and two young gentlemen who entrap young girls. So it's about two young gentlemen, and their names are Archer and Aimwell. Both their names are highly symbolic, and they want to trap young girls. Now, there is another playwright, John Vanbrugh, and he was attacked by Jeremy Collier in a short view of the immorality and profaneness of the English stage, who criticized restoration drama. So this is very important because जेरेमी कोलियर एक ऐसा प्ले राइट था जिसने कि एक बुक लिखी थी, उसका नाम था शॉर्ट व्यू ऑफ द इमोरलिटी एंड प्रोफेननेस ऑफ द इंग्लिश स्टेज। तो इस बंदे ने इस बुक में क्रिटिसाइज़ किया था रिस्टोरेशन थिएटर को, क्योंकि रिस्टोरेशन थिएटर बहुत ज़्यादा बॉडी था, बहुत ज़्यादा लाइसेंशियस था, उसमें बहुत ज़्यादा सेक्सुअल बातें होती थी। तो ये एक इम्पॉर्टेंट वर्क था जो कि क्रिटिसाइज़ करता है उस एज के प्लेस को। एंड जॉन वैनब्रू ने जो और भी चीज़ें लिखी हैं वो हैं रिलैप्स, वर्चू एंड डेंजर, विच इज़ अ सीक्वल टू किबलर्स लव्स लास्ट शिफ्ट। अब क्या है कि किबर जो थे, कॉली किबर, ही वॉज अनदर प्ले राइट ऑफ दैट पीरियड, एंड लव्स लास्ट शिफ्ट उनका प्ले था। लव्स लास्ट शिफ्ट में जो कॉली किबर हैं, so she or he, I'm not sure about the gender, sure tries to show, so yeah, कॉली किबर ने जो प्ले लिखा था, तो इस प्ले में what we find is that Amanda tries to reform his licentious husband Loveless, who is drunkard and sexually corrupt. She becomes a prostitute to lure her own husband in her luxurious home. He's been away from her 10 years and eventually reforms. तो ये रिफॉर्म हो जाता है किबर के प्ले में। बट रिलैप्स, एज यू नो, रिलैप्स मीन्स टू गो बैक टू एन अर्लियर स्टेट, जो कि वैनब्रू ने लिखा था, उसमें लवलेस जो है वो फिर से बेकार हो जाता है, फिर से ही बिकम्स वेरी वेन। सो दिस वॉज लाइक वैनब्रूज टेक ऑन Kibber's play. Another important play by Vanbrugh is The Provoked Wife. So I have copied the summary for you in a very short manner, and I think that going over summaries does not really make sense, but yes, like we can read it together. The hitherto virtuous Lady Brute is provoked to infidelity by her Sir husband, Sir John Brute. So Sir John Brute doesn't really love Lady Brute. So both of them married for the sake of their own conveniences. She for money, he for sex. The brutes are shackled by wedlock, but looking for diversions. So they don't really like love each other. He goes off for a drunken night on the town and ends up before a magistrate disguised in his wife's frock. Meanwhile, Lady Brute and her niece Belinda dress as shepherd market doxies for a secret tryst with their suitors, heart-free and constant, and are spied on by the envious Lady Fanciful. So two women like Lady Brute and her niece Belinda, they go out for their own exploits with their own lovers, but there is Lady Fanciful who is very envious, and he wants Heartfree for herself, so he tries to expose these two women to the husband. Belinda, despite interference from Lady Fanciful, wins her man and marries for love. So Belinda succeeds in marrying her man, and Lady Fanciful isn't able to do anything, but it ends sadly for the boozy brute who attempts to rape his wife, discovers two gallants lurking in his wardrobe, and finally ends up accepting certain situations rather than becoming a human pincushion. So when this guy called Brute discovers that his wife is with two men, so he accepts his fate, and he doesn't really challenge them to a duel, and he accepts his fate, and he says that that's okay, let's make a compromise, because he doesn't want to get injured fighting them. So it's a funny play in that sense. And yes, this is all that restoration drama is all about. In fact, it's funny and it's not very deep. It does not contain many philosophical themes. Of course, if one tries to look at it in a philosophical way, one will find themes of that sort, but it's basically profane and it's very exuberant. And while one is reading restoration drama, so one has to like think about its differences from Elizabethan theatre and how it differs largely from that. Another play by the provoked another play by him is The Provoked Husband, which was completed by Polly Kibber. And other playwrights of the age are Thomas Otway, and Thomas Otway was chosen for Aphra Behn's play but couldn't perform due to stage fear. Orphan, Unhappy Marriage, and Blank Verse Tragedy, and Venice Preserved, prologue written by Dryden. So these are other important, these are the two plays by Thomas Otway, Orphan and Unhappy Marriage, and they are blank verse tragedies. And Venice Preserved is important because its prologue was written by Dryden. Now, some critics also label Orphan and Venice Preserved as a first she tragedy because they focus on women's issues. And then there is another poem called A Poet's Complaint of His Muse, which is an autobiographical work of Otway. So Otway is not at all a major playwright or a major writer of the period, but these are some facts which are related to him which might be useful from an exam point of view. Now, there is another person called John Gay, and he was a member of the Scriblerus Club, and he was largely influenced by Pope, and he wrote a poem called Wine on the Joys of Drinking. And his most important work is The Beggar's Opera, which pokes fun at Italian opera. It's a ballad opera reworked by Brecht and Kurt Weill, satirizes Walpole. So here is a basic, very small kind of a plot summary of The Beggar's Opera because it's an important work. And it Peachum, a thief catcher, and his wife find their daughter Polly married a thief Macheath. So Peachum is not at all a good man, although he's a cop. He's a thief catcher sort of a person, but he's also very opportunist, and he is also not a morally good person. A thief catcher and his wife find their daughter Polly married a thief Macheath. Peachum, being greedy, plans death of Macheath because his death can bring them money. So he feels that if he dies somehow, then all the money that Macheath has will be transferred to his daughter, and so he plans to kill Macheath. Now Macheath is hid in a tavern by Polly, and he is surrounded by licentious women. So Polly hides him in a tavern, and then he meets or is surrounded by many licentious women. Two women employees of Peachum's drag him to Newgate prison. Now he is also dragged to a prison by two employees of Peachum, and they are two women, so they drag him to Newgate prison. Now there is his friend called Locket, and Locket's daughter Lucy, and also Polly both wish to marry Image. So Macheath is somebody who is surrounded by many women, and many women are claiming his right upon him. And there are women then who will come and say that you've made us pregnant and all of that stuff. So Peachum wants to hang Macheath, but let's see what happens. And this is a very short summary, so I'm trying to be as short as possible. If you need a coherent proper summary, then of course you'll have to visit the web. Now Lucy frees Macheath and tries to kill Peachum. Okay, so ultimately what happens is that Locket's daughter Lucy frees Macheath and tries to kill Peachum. Now Macheath is captured again by a woman called Dinah. Other pregnant women also claim to be his wife. So he's Macheath says that it's better if I die rather than being forced into marriage by so many women. But ultimately everything settles down, and Macheath marries Polly. So this is a very, very basic storyline of the Beggar's Opera, and I will suggest that you read this plot in detail, or I'll make another video because the video would get very long if I had inserted long summaries into it. Now, another important playwright is Afraben, and Afraben, a lot of people know about her. She is one of the first playwrights, and she's one of the first women to make a career out of writing, and she is known for two very famous works, Oronoku, or the Royal Slave, and the Rover. So the Rover is relatively famous, so I've inserted only the summary of Oronoku in the slides. You can read through them. I'll not go over them into much detail because the length of the video is going to be a lot. And Oronoku is about an African prince and his misadventures and his misfortunes, and it's also very important from a post-colonial perspective because it talks about the new world. So the eponymous hero is an African prince from Coromantine who is tricked into slavery and sold to European colonists in Suriname, where he meets the narrator. Ben's text is a first person account of Oronoku's life, love, rebellion, and execution. So ultimately, Oronoku gets executed. Oronoku, or the Royal Slave, centers on the unlucky love story of Oronoku, an African prince, and the beautiful Aimonaida. Oronoku is purchased by a Cornish man named Treffry, but given special treatment due to his education and ability to speak French and English. So he is actually sold as a slave. And Treffry mentions that he came to own a most beautiful enslaved woman and had to stop himself from raping her. Now, since both of them, Aimonaida and Oronoku, have been captured separately, so when Treffry reveals to Oronoku that he also has taken Aimonaida captive, so he's shocked. Unbeknownst to Oronoku, Treffry is speaking of Aimonaida, who is at the same plantation. The two lovers are reunited under the slave names of Caesar and Clemene, and the couple both decide that he should kill her, and so Aimonaida dies by his hand. To protect the honor of Aimonaida, Oronoku decides to kill her, and Oronoku hides in the woods to mourn her and grows weaker, becoming unable to complete his revenge. When he is discovered, he decides to show his fearlessness in the face of death. Oronoku cuts off a piece of his own throat and disembowels himself and stabs the first man who tries to approach him. So he becomes very wild and very angry, and of course he is very brave because he is not afraid of self-injury and self-harm. He in fact disembowels himself, and he also tries to kill the first man who tries to approach him, but ultimately he is captured and bound to a post. Resigned to his death, Oronoku asks for a pipe to smoke, as Bannister has him quartered and dismembered. So he's cut into pieces by the end of this text. So it's a very savage kind of an act that has been performed by so-called people who claim not to be savages. So he's cut into pieces, and this was the very sad fate of Oronoku. And the Rover is again a restoration comedy, and it involves people the gypsy. So you can have a summary of it from the internet, and it involves themes of marriage and reunion. Afraben's only tragedy is Abdelazer. So it was performed in 1676, and the other works that she wrote are The Emperor of the Moon and The Forced Marriage, which was her first play. Another playwright that I forgot to mention in this video is George Etheridge, and George Etheridge wrote plays such as The Man of Mode, Love in a Tub, and She Would If She Could. Now, he's also not very important, but if you want, you can read the summary for The Man of Mode. And yeah, so this is pretty much it about restoration drama and restoration comedy in particular. I'll be making more videos now, and I'm hopeful that you'll find these videos helpful. If you do, please share them with your friends. Thank you, guys.